Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Beautifully Broken podcast. I am here with a very special guest, Michael Baldwin. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, I'll read a little bit about you, Michael. I'm just going to say Michael is not just the founder and chairman of Baldwin Brothers, an investment management firm. He is also the founder of the Marion Institute, whose core mission is to drive and inspire change in the areas of health, healing, sustainability, education, and spirituality. You're also a Harvard grad. Congrats.
Right. Thank you.
Michael, we got connected through our good friend, Christine Dionisi, with our shared interest for health. And she was sharing with me that you have an incredible story around your relationship to not only the Marion Institute, but biological medicine.
Right.
Take us there. What got you started and interested, inspired?
Okay. Well, so I guess it means I'll talk about our son, who back in 93 came down with AML, a very, very, very serious form of leukemia. And he was on the cusp of 13 years of age. We picked him up at his camp in New Hampshire, raised him to Children's Hospital, Dana-Farber, went on a very special protocol, which was a complete waste. And happily, he was saved by a sister who was one of two people that were candidates for a 6x6 bone marrow transplant. Unfortunately, which is what can happen in leukemia, you can develop after the transplant confusion internally, and you get these graft versus host diseases. And he developed something, I won't give you the name, it's too complicated, but he destroyed half his lungs in about 7 weeks. And Children's in Dana-Farber knew about this form of lung disease, but they couldn't do anything about it except to hit him with a ton of steroids just to arrest the decline. And then they said to us, your son's going to have 50% of his lung capacity for the rest of his life. And I said, this is not acceptable. We've got to find something else. And I happened to read an interview with a Dr. Thomas Rau, who ran a clinic in Switzerland called Paracelsus. And I went over and sort of kicked the tires and was sort of startled that Dr. Rau, in his advice, didn't talk about minerals or vitamins or sort of alternative healthcare. He just said, I would have thought you'd like to come here and then learn why your son got cancer, which I thought was rather stunning. Anyway, the point is Nathaniel went over there starting in 95, and 2 years later, he had 100% of his lung capacity.
Wow.
So that set us on the road to really exposing as many people as we possibly could to biological medicine.
Yeah.
Which is Rau's not invention, but he tweaked it a lot and created a model that's we're practicing now in our clinic in Providence.
Yeah, it's fascinating. That's an incredible story. And so your son is doing really good today?
Yeah, he's fine. He's great.
That's amazing.
Absolutely great.
Now, to delve into biological medicine, because that's a conversation, right? It's like, what is biological medicine? Most people are familiar with our typical allopathic model where we're treating usually the symptoms of disease. We're great at emergency medicine, a heart attack, a stroke. But if somebody falls in this homeostatic balance of being in a chronic condition or a chronic loop in which there is no evolution of the disease, they really get stuck. And for me, that's where biological medicine really walks back preconception. So it's if you can take us, what has been your understanding if you were to explain biological medicine to someone?
Well, biological medicine, which you have to remind everybody is scientific and logical. It's not woo-woo stuff. On the other hand, it does look at both the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. But what it does is it gets to the root cause of an illness, as opposed to what allopathic does so much of, which is what we call symptom suppression. I've got a
Mhm.
pain, I've got arthritis, I've got heart condition. I take a pill, I take another pill. It gives me sort of instant gratification to suppress the manifestation of the problem, pain or otherwise, and that is the cure. Well, it's not a cure, it's just symptom suppression. So when you get into biological medicine, it is all oriented a great deal behind the incredibly sophisticated diagnostics that go with it, all of which would be totally weird to anybody if I talk too much about it today because it's so very different from allopathic. It's incredibly sophisticated, and the whole point of it is to show way in advance what's starting to weaken or go awry. So it's really oriented to preventative stuff, and of course the and it's also very oriented towards what the cells thrive on, which is oxygen and electrons. So there are just 15 to 20 therapies that we use at our clinic and also abroad, which are all oriented pretty much towards introducing those two factors.
Yeah, that's my language.
Yeah.
I always say healing is a story of electrons. That's what we're trying to add more energy with this idea that within the body, both the physical and the spiritual body, there is a force directing this energy to heal. And when the almost you can almost literally say when the light that the cell is emitting is dim, we don't have that extra electron spin. So it's fascinating that it does work like that. And there's brilliant cases. I love my most simple case of this. I had a friend with a father who had a non-healing bed sore, a great big bed sore, and what they had done, and they had worked at it for a year, all the creams, all the patches, all the bandaging, and they had taken a pulsed red light laser and they had just run it over and just given red light to the sore, and it was like a week, and it
Mhm.
just closed up and healed. And the body, it was quite a great example of the body really needed light.
Yeah. Yep. But the other thing is the whole silo approach and the whole one size fits all. So the silo approach is you never have anybody who's really coping with the whole body. And whether the problem is heart or liver or kidney or arthritis or whatever it might be. So you go to the specialist. The specialist gives you a pill for your heart problem. You go to the endocrinologist. You get another pill from the endocrinologist. Nobody is communicating. Nobody is sharing information. And nobody is looking at the entire body to try to determine why these manifestations of dis-ease or imbalance is being generated. And of course, Rao always used that wonderful metaphor of the disease barrel. And we all have a disease barrel. It's constantly filling with toxicity, and more so than ever today because of all the reasons we're aware of. And what you have to do is you've got to drain that barrel and you've got to build up your immune system. So for Nathaniel, he had 20 times the normal chemo, which is a poison, as we all know. And even though it arrested and took care of his AML leukemia, we had to get rid of that poison and we had to build up his immune system, which was, of course, very much compromised by the chemo. So there are all these factors that come into play with respect to why does it work.
Yeah.
And of
It's
course, it often, Freddie, it's not instant gratification. And,
yeah.
you also learn, did cancer start yesterday? Did arthritis start last week? No, it probably started 20, 30 years ago. So when you think, well, let's get rid of it, within a week or 2 weeks, you got to realize that it's going to take
Yeah.
sometimes a couple of years.
Yeah, there's so many directions I could go here. Michael, I would love to hear when you went over and you took your son, because you took your son overseas to peristalsis, yes?
Right.
Uh,
Correct.
w- how was that experience for you when you were looking at all these things that were not what you were used to as far as medicine? Were you completely accepting of all the therapies and the different modalities? And what were some of the things that you did that might sound outside of the box to somebody?
Well, I think the biggest thing that happens in biomed with cancer is Iscador, um, the mistletoe. Mistletoe is a huge anti-cancer uh, uh, biological medicine. So he had enormous number of mistletoe shots up and down his back.
Mm.
But then he also did a great deal with oxygen, with the generation of electrons. And there are all sorts of different ways in which these can be administered. And then, of course, IVs, particularly with ozone.
Mhm.
And I mean, sure, it was all Greek to me, but what was I going to lose? There was, I mean, people go, well, oh gosh, are these things going to hurt me in some other way? Is there going to be some sort of fallout? Like, if you take this pill, you're probably going to drop dead in the ads that you hear on TV. Everything you do in biomed is beneficial. It doesn't have poisonous side effects. So, when you go in there with all this sort of choice of what you can do, whether it's a Paracelsus or an R clinic, you just say, you almost don't care. Well, I think I'll do this and this and this today, and maybe next month I'll do that and that and that. And so
Mm.
the experience at Paracelsus was really fabulous people, fabulous Rao. I mean, he's an extraordinary man, Rao, because he has a sixth sense.
Yeah.
He really does, which is a
Yeah.
very highly unusual thing, and not many doctors have it.
Yeah. How much biological medicine have you applied to your body and in your life?
100%. Now, I go to a GP because, I mean, I'm 82 and, things fall apart and you may have to rush to the hospital and you need to have a local GP. But from the point of view of maintenance of health and detoxing and building an immune system, I guess I go to the clinic in Providence every other week. So does my
Okay.
wife. Yeah. And then about
Wonderful.
every once or twice a year, you do an upgrade as far as looking at the diagnostics again and seeing how things are going. I mean, it's a constant. You're not on this program for life. You're on this program to correct an imbalance that you've generated over the past years or whatever. And so you check in. All right, do I still need to take these supplements? Probably not. You may have something else you have to take.
Yeah. And what are some of your favorite therapies that you're able to do at Biomed Center that you find are kind of fun and
Well,
enjoyable?
I there's something called a sound bed,
Mm-hmm.
which I lie on. It's a water bed, and it vibrates, and it's all the dials, the vibration for relaxation, the vibration for all sorts of different things, plus music. I then do a breathing of oxygen while I'm lying there, and then I have an electron coil that I lay on my chest, so I do three things at once and fall sound asleep.
That's great.
It's one of the best. Another one
Yeah.
that's really unbelievable, which is incredibly important, is lymph drainage. And
Mm-hmm.
then, of course, in allopathic medicine, lymph drainage? What the hell's lymph drainage? But we have to realize how the toxins accumulate in the myriad of lymph nodes, and you've got to purge them. So there's a wonderful therapy called Flowpresso, which I do once a month at the center.
Amazing. Yeah, very, very familiar.
And of course, the other big thing, Freddie, which I'm sure you know and a lot of people know, is the inclusion of the head, particularly the jaw, the teeth, and in allopathic medicine, that's for dentistry. We don't deal with that with the GP. In allopathic, you've got to understand one of the beliefs they have is around the Chinese system of meridians. And every tooth has a connection to something internally. And if you're not dealing with the tooth problem, and by the way, 70% of illness starts in the mouth. So you have to look at your amalgam fillings. You have to look at your root canals. You have to look at the jaw. I mean, it's highly sophisticated. And if there is what they call a foci, in other words, an influence, then you got to deal with the tooth, which will then release the problem. And in Paracelsus, they one of the things they kept track of very much so was breast cancer, because it was so phenomenally successful in getting rid of the breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And in something like 94 or 5% of the breast cancer patients over a period of 5 years, the tooth on the breast meridian was impacted.
Yep.
And I mean, that just goes to show, I mean, biological medicine incorporates Chinese, Ayurvedic, naturopathic, herbal, allopathic, anthroposophical. I mean, it's the best of the best.
Yeah.
They're all incorporated.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. It's funny. I always tell people they began a root canal on the side of my body where I had cancer, and it was just one of those things I've heard and I ask people all the time. I'm like, have you ever had a root canal? What side of your body? If you look, there's this great poster that shows the circuitry, the nerves that run up from the teeth, up and around and attached to every single organ. And it really is, the teeth are almost like, you could think of it like a circuit breaker in your house, in which they're going to open up that energetic channel to that corresponding part of the body.
Yeah.
It is the body is wild. So, Michael, given your experience with your son and your the experience with Dr. Rao, what you came back to the United States, and how did you get involved with Marion, and what happened after that experience overseas?
Well, the Marion Institute, which I created, I guess, sort of it was just sort of a whim. I mean, it wasn't even a whim. I'm sort of a voracious reader. I'm incurably curious. I read sometimes way too much. I get a New Yorker, I look at an article, I go, do I really need to read that article? And I can't resist. The point is, I shared a lot of information with an ever growing audience. And then it started to become quite expensive. And I was hiring people to take care of it because I was running the investment advisory firm. And so then I thought, well, I better get a deduction. So I created the Marion Foundation in those days, now the Institute, hired a part-time executive director. And anyway, a great deal of what we did in those days was learning about a whole host of different subjects, everything from paranormal to health to native traditions, business and transition. I mean, there was a whole host of interests, and we threw an enormous number of conferences and workshops. And it was a lot of sort of self-discovery work.
Mm-hmm.
We did holotropic breath work. We did overtone chanting. We did past life regression work. I mean, on and on and on. And when we got into Nathaniel and his illness, I came back and I thought, listen, this navel gazing is great. And it is very helpful to people to understand more about themselves. But you got to do something more than this. And that triggered the first sort of outreach to educate and to expose as many people as possible to the merits of biological medicine.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it all sort of started. And we had many, many courses, and we had many, many practitioners come and learn from Rao and a couple of the other biomed doctors over the years. And it's a tough road. It's a tough road because it's such a 180.
It is.
And now we're doing much more active stuff around health, generally, but involves a great deal around food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is when you say it's a 180. You got to let go of a lot of programming and a lot of ideas that you consider to be, well, this is what it is. You have the body is injected with some type of bacteria, and then disease forms. And this it really is. The education is a great model for this, because you really do need to be re-educated on
To-
how the body, how the itself, and then there's other. And when we have these things like other, like metals, what is the process of the body getting rid of mercury? It's fascinating. And even with all I know, I'm just like eight hours into this intro to biological medicine, and I've read Dr. Rao's books back in the day when I went through Lyme disease and my cancer, and I was always I took it in. But this course I started at Marion has a different level of you get the backstory, you get the whys, as
Yeah,
opposed to not just do this because.
yeah.
I've really enjoyed the process. What do you think, you know, what do you think if you had to say what is, you said it's a tough road. What is the problem? Um if you and I have this experience where we're like, when you look at the body as more holism, we know it works. We know we can deliver better healing, more health. Um why is it sometimes hard to get the message out there, do you think?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with habituation. Um, I mean, we're so brainwashed about allopathic medicine as being the only way. And then it has a lot to do with fear. I
Hmm.
mean, I see so many of our friends, particularly at our age, who come down with cancer and are going through the chemo process. And not which, we don't sort of scream at them or object. I mean, chemo, we've learned through our son, works.
Same.
But then you just say, you do know it's a poison. You do know it's impacting your immune system. And we would suggest that you get down to the center, detox, because that poison sits around for a long time and is not being beneficial after its initial use. And the other thing is it's compromising your immune system. So build it up. And most of them say, well, I better get the permission from my doctor. And the doctor usually says, that's a bunch of crap. And we would suggest you don't try it. Even with something like, the importance of vitamin C, which is huge, particularly in cancer. Oh, no, 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 no. It's probably, too much and it's going to hurt your gut. And I don't know.
Yeah,
So I think it's just that people are fearful, they're brainwashed, and particularly when it's serious, seriously serious, like cancer, of course they're scared. And you do hear great stories about the allopathic approach to cancer. So
of
you
course.
think, I'm going to go there and be my guest. I'm not going to stop you, but I am going to suggest that you want to deal with the after effects.
Yeah, I really like the both and conversation. I think most people can hear that in some way, but I understand what you're saying too. A lot of times when I'll speak to somebody, and I get a lot of probably once or twice a week, I get a Freddie, I know you went through cancer and all these surgeries. What do I do? Here's what I'm looking at. And I always say, I was like, well, listen, you're probably going to do the standard of care if that resonates. And then look, there's all these other things that we can do to support the body. That actually, like you said, I think the best point is that they do no harm. These aren't things that have adverse reactions. They're things that, you're going to feel it or you're not. So
Right.
I'm such a huge proponent for understanding. But what's missing in that scenario that I laid out, that person really needs a guide. And that's what I will often, I'm like, you got to go talk to, this person who is working the functionary of their whole role is to put all the pieces together, because I can't tell you the pieces in an Instagram message. It's irresponsible of me to say, oh, go do this one therapy, because it's holism. It's like everything involved. Um,
Well,
yeah.
this is why, Freddie, one of the great problems for biomed also is, and there's a wonderful doctor in Boston who's picked up on Otto Warburg, whose understanding of cancer back in the 1920s is what now people are really gravitating towards. But when I talk to this doctor and say, I think you should take a look at biological medicine, well, he says, I certainly will, but you've got to give me triple blind studies before I'm going to take any interest. And of course, you have to understand the worst thing you can say about biomed is one size fits all. Because in biomed, every single individual is unique. So you may have prostate cancer. I may have prostate cancer. You are not going to get the same treatment that I'm going to get. There may be overlap, but you can't do double blind, triple blind studies because everybody is going to be treated differently.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really a critical part of it. That's the whole examination of the individual from all these aspects of emotional and physical, spiritual, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Your constitutions, your temperaments,
Yeah,
miasms. I had someone mention miasms to me like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I was like, what is that crap? That's not real. And then you're like, oh, it does. There's actually like there are some studies in PubMed about the initial miasms driving the science of homeopathy. It's really fascinating. And it is helpful to understand, especially I've found the constitution and the temperament, like what my
right.
dietary temperament is going to tell me about what foods cause cooling, what foods cause heat, and how that's going to affect any therapy that I would be engaging in. So why wouldn't you look at that?
Yeah. And I mean, it's like all this new stuff that's going on with CTEs, childhood traumatic events.
Yes.
And this is a major, major, I mean, in fact, I wasn't too aware of it until this past weekend with Dr. Tom,
Mm-hmm.
who spent a whole morning on CTEs. And of course, it's not just the ones you remember your traumatic experiences or can be coaxed out of you, let's say, by a shrink. You got to remember these traumatic events occur in utero and they occur pre-utero. And so the other thing to remember is, a divorce, you have twin children. A divorce for one of the twins may be traumatic. For the other twin, it's sort of a no, who gives a hoot. So it's not so much the magnitude of the trauma from an external point of view, it's the way in which it's interpreted by the individuals who's impacted by it. It's big.
Yeah.
And I was unaware of all the science of the fallout from traumatic childhood events insofar as health is concerned. It's huge.
It's the figures on CTEs are incredible. If anybody's had a chance, there's a great podcast with Tim Ferriss and Gabor Mate, in which he talks about his new book. And I mean, he's talked about this work for a long time, but the evidence of downstream chronic conditions, cancers, heart failures, the numbers, it's, again, it's impossible to deny. I want to go back to the idea of this bio individuality that we all bring to the table. How does this, Michael, do you have a vision for how this could scale? Because you're like, you're imagining the system that we exist in now, which is we all know it's broken. I think most people would say, I have a general dissatisfaction with how I'm cared for. And if you've ever been through a chronic condition, then you really have that, like, oh, this is broken. You're frustrated. But how does something like this scale?
Mm. Well, I just watched the struggle we have with the Biomed Center in Providence, which is very definitely on a trajectory of interest and increased patients and inquiries and everything else, greatly helped by, as you probably know, Christine.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough. I mean, if we get this center into sustainability, we will try to replicate it in different cities, is our intent. But I had no idea how difficult the challenge would be to get people to buy in. So it's not just that, it's It's the degree to which the care absorbs time, particularly the whole diagnostic process. So if you go to the Biomed Center in Providence, you get 3 major sessions, an hour, 30 minutes, another hour or 30 minutes with a doctor. And, that compared to what you get in allopathic, which is mostly with the nurse, and then 5 minutes with the GP, who's got to get you in and out in 15 minutes. This is a huge contrast. Now, you may pay a little more for our process, of course, because of the amount of time, but it also impedes the the road to sustainability, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And of course, the other thing, Freddie, which I think is so important, so often what you get in the way of patients coming into the center or going to Paracel or wherever, desperate cases.
Yes.
The allopathic doctor has given up. We don't care what you want to do. Try anything you like. So in they come, fourth stage, whatever it might be. And it's tough.
Yeah.
And what people have to, the biggest lesson is to try to make people understand how to avoid that disease barrel spilling over into a chronic illness. So just because you feel great and your doctor GP is telling you, wow, like they do every time I have my annual physical, you're in fantastic shape. And I don't bother to say, little do you know what's afoot within my body. But, it's preventative is what you have to get into. And that's
Yeah.
tough because people think, I feel great. Why do I need to do anything?
Yeah. I do, as I'm going through some of the educational modules, I'm imagining how powerful this would be as this some of the information could be distilled down for a course in public school. And so
Yeah,
from a young age, that
yeah,
kids would be learning about what the signals their bodies are giving them, because that was something I was never tapped into until I had to be. It was like you have diarrhea, you take an anti-diarrhea medication to stop up your body that's trying to let things out of your colon. You have a headache, you suppress the inflammation with some type of a pain reliever. We're constantly numbing the voice, and it's such a different way of thinking about it. And also, like, the other example I really like that Dr. Tom uses is the example of the tree in all 4 seasons. That there's a time when it leaves, when there's a time when it will fruit, there's a time when it's barren. And so I look at the way we operate in the modern world, and we're like always expected to fruit. You just got to
yeah,
put out, put out, put out, put out. That's not honoring the laws of cyclical change in the world. And it's almost like we're looking to bypass disease. Well, of course you're sick. Of
yeah,
course your hips are burning out. Whatever's coming. It's like we haven't honored the cycles of rest and
yeah,
restorative nature. And I think there's something there that people could hear if it was framed in the right way and get excited about.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And of course, he also uses that tree to show how everybody's focused on the trunk and the leaves and the branches. And where you've got to go are into the root system. You've got to go subterranean. And that gets you where everything is manifest. And, it's a great metaphor or analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think the other thing that I thought was so profound, and that I join with the Biomed Center and Dr. Tom and Marion Institute, that emotional toxicity is one of the
Ah,
most voracious. And it's, again, talk about a skill set you're never given, right? Or it's certainly not. It's your. I just look at the way people chastise their kids in the grocery store when they're misbehaving. They're like, "Don't, no, stop!" Blah. So you're like, "Wait, they're I." It's wild. It's wild, but we don't have any. There is no emotional intelligence, emotional vocabulary that we're taught in public school. I feel like that's like should be like year 3 for 4. Learn all the words for feelings. Learn all the words for grief or sadness or elation, or we're just happy, angry, mad, sad, tired.
Well, it's a real crisis. It's a real crisis, as we're well aware, particularly amongst the teenagers and all, with respect to suicide and depression, lost souls. It's very, very serious. And there's just so much garbage that we have to cope with the clickety clickety click, and nobody talking and nobody dining together, and everybody off on their own little trajectory. And it's also, I think, a crisis of narcissism, and we've lost empathy uh, because we've become a world of narcissists.
Yeah,
It's grim.
it's
It's
grim.
grim.
It's
I
grim.
mean, I think it's pretty grim.
It's grim, but that's why we do podcasts like this, because we're instilling hope. And somebody's going to hear this episode and they're going to be interested enough to find their way down the path. They're going to look up Dr. Tom. They're going to look up Dr. Rao. They're going to look up the Marion Institute. They're going to look up the Biomed Center in Providence, Rhode Island, or Scottsdale, Arizona. And they're going to go poke around and they're going to go see. I'll tell you, I looked when I was really sick. It was like, I was like surgery number 4, 2012. I looked up the Biomed Center in Arizona, and at the time I was balancing so many plates that financially I couldn't swing it.
Mhm.
And I would also say this, my hindsight, if I had to, I probably would have. I felt terrible and I was just like, man, nothing was working, wasn't getting any improvement. I was very much in the I had found functional medicine, which I often tell people it's a step up. Functional is a step up, but there's
Sure.
an assumption that with all the datas and numbers, you're going to get better information, and somehow therein lie your lab results are going to be the answers between
Yeah.
supplements and more drugs. Which, I mean, listen, I think there's value there, but if I'm really being honest with myself, the things that move the needle for me were the energetic tools. It was like the lights and the grounding and behavior and sleep, emotional intelligence, PEMF coils, AMP coil was profound for me. You know, all those things were really, and what I was doing without realizing it, I was just supporting all the way my system would naturally recover anyway.
That's great. I mean, we have this great challenge because, of course, there's no insurance,
Right.
and that's my great next challenge. If I can get the center into sustainability, I've now got to go after the insurance companies to make them understand the obvious benefits of backing insurance for biomed. Which is pretty clear, but it's going to be an enormous hurdle, and that's why we have a scholarship fund at the center, so that it doesn't have to be fairly affluent people who are the only candidates to come there. But then there is also a very sort of basic series of ingredients for what each of us can do, which is the kind of thing we're teaching or planning to teach in all of the schools that we work with in New Bedford and Fall River, which are very poor communities. And they're the 10 things that Dr. Rao talks about that you might have read about, but none of them costs anything really.
Yeah.
So you do dry brushing for the lymph nodes. You raise the head of your bed 3 inches, which also helps to drain the lymph nodes. You do much deeper breathing. You teach yourself to take bigger breaths, which if you keep doing it, you will breathe less shallowly. And the list goes on. I mean, of course, it includes you've got to go outside in bare feet and ground yourself because of the energy that comes up from the ground. You've got to meditate or have relaxation. I mean, and you've got another one is you got to have some fun every day. So there, that kind of what people would say, oh, that's so silly. I have no time for fun. I have no time to run out in my bare feet and think that something's happening to me from the earth. But then there are the practical things and there are 10 of them, and they don't cost a dime. So it's very important for us at the Marion Institute and also at the center to make sure people become aware of that who really just can't afford to come.
Yeah, I think that is that has the potential to make the most profound impact, is finding that education at an early
Yeah.
age, understanding the systems of the body,
Right.
all the things that you do have, I don't want to say control, but you do have some influence over,
Well,
which
yeah,
makes a difference down the road. Especially when you
I
start adding
mean,
up days, start adding up 2 years of those, the things you just mentioned, just lymphatics and allowing the lymphatic system and the brain to drain. I mean, downstream decisions right there. It's like maybe we wouldn't do so many stupid things as teenagers. Maybe we probably would have, but
yeah. Well, I mean, it's generating, it's generating beneficial habits. And boy, are they tough.
yes.
It's learning to floss your GD teeth, which I find so boring, but new good habits. And it's so akin to what we have to face in all these schools, these elementary schools in New Bedford, of which there are 19, where Marion Institute now has these gardens, and working with the children, working with the parents, working with the community, and they're all many different ethnicities, different sections, and understand about growing good organic food. These children don't even know what a beet is. What is this? I have no idea. Or a carrot. And so it's basics that, sometimes it's so stunning to figure out, oh my God, they don't really get it. They don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's why, that kind of education, like you're suggesting, could be so important.
Yeah. I think that's where it's at. I get that intuitive hit a lot. Um, and it is profound how those little shifts, we assume we make, I did this for a long time. I made the assumption that everybody was like this complicated case with like mold and Lyme disease and cancer, like me. I was like, oh,
Mhm.
everybody, because that's the stories that I was listening to online. That's who I was surrounding myself with, other people who couldn't get better. And the reality is not everybody is to that stage or will be to that stage. So I think it's really important to pull back sometimes and look at, wow, there are people who don't know about carrots. Like we can start thinking, it's easy to be in your little echo chamber, especially
Yeah,
in this level of high elite like wellness.
yeah,
But like, oh, this is a great point, Michael. People don't know what a carrot is. That's a great spot to start. Whole Foods, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Totally, totally. Yep.
I love it. So the my other question for you is, when we look at the so we got Biomed in Rhode Island, we got Biomed in Scottsdale. Now you're associated with that center as well?
Oh, yeah, because Dr. Tom and Dr. Drobot are the two doctors out there. Um, it's sort of interesting, just to give you a quick sidebar on Dr. Tom. He was the dean of the school in Oregon that's a naturopathic, very famous naturopathic college,
Mm-hmm.
and a revered teacher, absolutely revered teacher. And his student, Dr. Drobot, persuaded him to come and join him in Scottsdale. And the reason Dr. Tom agreed is because he noticed with his student body, the goal was gradually morphing out of caregiving into greed.
Mm.
And he just decided, I'm not going to do it. I don't want that kind of motivation to be what I'm rewarding with my education.
Yeah.
And that's depressing.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And it's
It sure
wound
is all
in,
pervasive.
it's all pervasive. It's wound into a lot of the stories and I would say in some layer of everybody's life we're going to experience like these truths. We're going to be able to unwind that from ourselves, or we're not. We're going to get swept up in it. Um, but it's really good. It's really good to be able to step back and like just see the field for a second. Now, how would you differ Rhode Island from Scottsdale, the two biomed centers?
Well, and frankly, it differs from what's available overseas, too.
Mm-hmm.
I should quickly say the Paracelsus Clinic collapsed. Rao is not part of it.
Hmm.
just for information purposes.
Right.
Rouse
People go
created
looking
a
that
new
up.
clinic, Sonnenberg Clinic. And then one of the other former doctors at Paracelsus, Ralph Ottmeyer, has his own clinic. Those are the two biggies in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Scottsdale is brilliant. It's smaller. And so we have a broader range of therapies. We have exactly the same diagnostics. And the other big element that we have is we have truly the state of the art dentistry with a brilliant, brilliant dentist. And it's like, 22nd century. It's so advanced.
Amazing.
And, we have one of the two cone beams in Rhode Island where you get a vision, not just of the teeth, but the whole jaw. And that is a huge role, the jaw, the teeth, as we discussed.
Yeah.
And that's really the only difference. And Drobot comes every other month to our center and deals with his East Coast patients.
Yeah.
But
So
that's it. That's it.
that's it.
And that's what's so sad. And you know what? I'll just say quickly, one of the things that was so depressing about all the education that we did with all of these practitioners, we constantly tried to get them to band together, to create a force, to create a committee or whatever that would bring more credibility to the movement, as it were.
Hmm.
You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Everybody said, oh, that was brilliant what Rao did or what whomever did, but I really think I can do it better. So I'm going home to do my version. So there was no keenness to collaborate, to create a community of like-minded folks, to promote something. And that was a major problem.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It
tis
wasn't
it
ready.
is.
It
Tis
wasn't
it
ready for whatever reason to arise from the field
is.
yet.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yet.
a most positive way to go. Yeah.
Well, it's in that universal soup somewhere. I think it's fascinating. When I would look back at, going back to the model of like uh, sustainability or financial viability, I'm pretty sure in Switzerland, if you were a citizen of Switzerland, were those clinics, was that included in your
Mm-hmm.
being a entity
Well,
of the country?
in other words, being paid for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. And as a patient, if you go over there, you're going to blow it, like 12 grand or more a week. I mean,
Yeah.
it's expensive.
And you're not there for a week. You're there for,
Well, you go for a week usually.
yep.
That's what we always did. Sometimes with Nathaniel, we'd be there for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
One little thing about Nathaniel. So he has a partial year abroad from his college, and it's India. He goes to India. And I say, look, Nathaniel, let's meet up at Paracelsus and have you have a checkup before you come home. So we meet up at Paracelsus. We start out on a Monday morning. And you can see there's a little sort of a flutter by Rao and his assistant. Tuesday, it's more than a flutter. Wednesday, it's starting to look like panic. Thursday, it's, my God, the leukemia is returning. And so, okay, we ain't going home. We got to stay around here. And they worked on him over the weekend and everything. And he reverted to health the following Monday, Tuesday. It showed things were working out. But Rao said to him, you cannot go back to India, Nathaniel. India is a place lacking groundedness. And
Mm,
that's you. And you're too much out of your body. And that
mm.
place is going to impact your health. So stay away from India.
Did he go back?
Never.
Oh my God.
But it gives you this sort of, some of the stuff that becomes a little woo-woo for people.
Yeah.
But frankly, I think has a great deal of credibility.
Yeah. It's, man, it's like, these incredible tools. It's all about whose hands are wielding the information and the direction.
Yeah.
I do like for the most of for the most of my experience, especially with biological medicine, it really is like more of an empowerment and education, learning about your body. You're making the decisions about what you're willing to do or not willing to do with a lot of these therapies. A majority of it is lifestyle, and it's being on the road for like you said, it's not a weekend. It's like we're going to do this for life
Yes,
in
you have
some
to take
aspect.
ownership. You have to
Right.
take ownership of the healing process or the detoxing process.
Yeah.
You can't just say, why didn't you call me and tell me to go do another IV with ozone? Wait a minute.
Yep. No.
Take it upon yourself
Yeah.
to heal yourself.
Yeah. So
With all these tools.
this is
Yeah.
really interesting to me. I think I think there's something here. So my doctor in Austin um, has a great clinic, and he would say precision medicine. There's elements of biologics and hyperbaric and ketamine assisted trauma therapy and amp coils and hyperbaric chambers, ozone. Great practice. Dasein Health, and I'm going to send you this podcast with this guy. He's a total game changer, rock star naturopath,
Great,
nurse
great.
practitioner. What I like is he structured his rent, like in his equipment buy, with a client. He figured out what clientele number that would be on a subscription model. So everybody pays every month, no matter what. Right? You have a click, like leasing a
Sure.
mid-range car. And then if you go in and get therapies, everything's super moderately priced. So I will tell you, it's the highest precision medicine I've ever done in my life at Design Health, and it's the most affordable. And I mean it. Like I pay a good chunk of change because I'm like doing the elective stuff. I'm like, oh, I want to do a ozone blood IV this week, and I want to do a methylene blue, and then I want to do a vitamin C. I want to do a Myers cocktail at the end of the month. I traveled a lot this month. Can I get 3 sessions in the hyperbaric chamber? I'm going to schedule for an ice bath and some red light therapy. But because a lot of those things that I mentioned, a lot of them are just included, like the cold thermodynamic,
Mhm,
the red light, the amp coils,
mhm.
compression therapy, all those, or like a hyperbaric chamber, a 2 atmosphere hard shell chamber is like, it's a $25 add-on,
Wow.
because we're all paying. So there is like this, there's like a community by a co-op model.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting, Freddie, because we discussed it yesterday at a meeting. Just exactly what you're talking about. Christine
Yeah.
brought it up.
And I think, especially obviously with better guidance and a better medical staff and a bigger staff and the dentistry and all those things, you can see at some point you're like, oh, well, what is a reasonable amount to get everybody to pay, provided you eliminate like colorectal cancer in your life, and you eliminate your like last 20 years being debilitating arthritis. I'm like, I think that's where the mind shit. I could edit that out. I probably won't. The mind shift comes from, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, all of a sudden you're seeing the long game, and you're like, oh, it's really not that expensive, because what I'm getting on the other end is a quality of life that, if I were ill, I'd be saying I'll pay anything for. I would do
Well,
anything to have that health back.
what Dick does, and it's so expensive, we can't afford it, we don't get any insurance. Dick says, now listen, gang, you have house insurance for emergencies. You don't get the roof redone. You don't get the pipes fixed. You don't get this. You don't have to paint and pay for it. You have car insurance, but it doesn't do the oil change. It doesn't give you new tires. It doesn't do blah, blah, blah. What it does, it gets you emergency stuff. There's a fire that burns your house down. There's a car accident that destroys some of your car. And he says, you got to look at this health creation maintenance model and realize that, yes, you have health insurance, you break the bone, you have a heart attack, whatever. But for the maintenance and restorative nature of biomed, pay for it, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
And it's a rather good analogy, it seems to me, because everybody does their house insurance, does the car insurance, and they have their health insurance. But if you go beyond the emergency stuff, if you know, it's wait a minute, I'm not getting reimbursed.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's the conversation to have. And
yeah,
again, we know, we don't, the thing is, it's like the therapies and the modalities to add oxygen, electron, mental, emotional balance. We got a lot of good therapies out there. It's really like the how are you applying? How are you getting access? How are you educating around these? How do they come into the fold? That, whatever it is, it's this community model, it's a co-op of medicine.
yeah.
But that is, that's really the conversation. The other thing is like, when you have a systemic infection, you do not need a Band-Aid.
Hmm.
You gotta look at the whole picture. We gotta go back to the drawing board on a lot of this stuff. And I just think I haven't necessarily seen it happen, you know, um, but I do like the conversation. I am excited about it because I was just at the Upgrade conference in Orlando with
Hmm.
with our friend Christine and our friend Desiree from Flowpresso, and everybody. I was like, "How was it for you? What was the thing?" And I was like, it's all a bit much. Like I feel overwhelmed. I'm
Yeah.
like and it's fun to be there, this great community, all the toys, all the gadgets. I'm like, this whole event, and I mean this with the best amount of love, is so problematic. Because if you were to walk into this store, it's like a kid in a candy store, and you're like, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God,
yeah.
I need this, I want this, I want this. It needs a container in which people understand the when and the where and the how. And I don't see that yet. I know people are selling systems like that. I haven't seen one for me. I think the languaging around biological medicine makes the most sense to be applied to these tools to date, anyway.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. Very good.
That's my TED Talk.
Okay. Very good. Excellent.
Michael, it's been a pleasure talking and speaking and connecting and getting to know you. I
Thank
is
you.
is there
Me
anything
too.
else? Is there anything else? Let me do this. You get a magic wand. You're going to like tune all the televisions and all the smartphones to your channel. You get to speak to everybody on planet Earth for a minute. What would you tell people?
I would tell them to wake up. Just briefly, two of my brothers and I are working on something called the Great Relearning, which is trying to make us all understand the degree of misinformation, lies, falsehoods that are permeating everywhere. And they've got to be challenged. And they've got to deal with the fear about stepping out and beyond so much of that crap. And this is just, you can be disappointed with your allopathic approach for so many reasons, but do something about it. Inquire, study, search. And that's something that's really lacking today. People are not capable of exploring and learning anymore. They don't read. Anyway, that's it. That's it.
Stay curious,
Yeah,
search, read,
yeah,
ask
right,
better questions if you want a better
right,
life. That's what I'm
right.
hearing.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it. Well, it's been a treat on my end,
And for
and
me,
we're going to talk more. Yes, big love. Bye.